Hi, good morning. Welcome to CIO Leadership Live. I'm Mary Fran Johnson, the Executive Director of CIO Programs here at IDG, and I am very privileged today to be interviewing Cynthia Stoddard, who is the Senior Vice President and CIO of Adobe Systems. Cynthia joined this $7 billion global tech provider in June of 2016, and she brought along with her more than 25 years of business experience and IT leadership expertise from roles at NetApp, Safeway Grocery Chain, and the NOL Group, a global transportation and logistics company. Now, Adobe, as we all know, is a very well-known tech industry player, the inventor of software solutions such as Acrobat and Photoshop and many more. And about 5 years ago, Adobe made the kind of shift that so many of your companies have underway today, where they moved from the more traditional business model, in their case as an on-premise software, desktop software provider, to a cloud-based, essentially a cloud-based version of itself and all its products. Today, subscriptions through their cloud offerings account for 80% of Adobe's revenue. Now, enabling that level of business transformation has meant that the IT group, which is around 1,000 people internally and then several hundred more in contract and additional resources, the IT group had to evolve to a next-gen technology organization that was focused on doing business in the cloud. And as we're going to be talking about today, there are a whole lot of different skills and capabilities that need to come along with that. And like many of our guests here on Leadership Live, Cindy's CIO role has actually expanded outside the traditional kind of duties and capabilities that we associate with being the Chief Information Officer. She actually has the entire Cloud Operations Business Unit at Adobe reporting into her, as well as the entire tech organization. And one of her top focus areas for IT innovation, which we'll be talking about quite a bit today, includes leveraging machine learning and artificial intelligence as both a product and a business enabler. So welcome. It's so great to have you here.
It's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. Well, let's dive right in. I'm always fascinated when I encounter that dual role where you're a CIO. I think of it as the CIO plus roles. And you are running the cloud operations business, which from what you've told me is more akin to running an engineering business than a classic business ops. But talk a little bit about how that dual role, how does that drive your day-to-day?
So I love my dual role. And what Cloud Ops, what the role and what I do, as part of Cloud Ops, is it runs all the operations for the SaaS-based businesses that you were talking about.
Yes.
Our Creative Cloud, Photoshop, our Document Cloud, all of the above.
That 80% of revenue.
Yeah, that
Yes.
80% of revenues. So there's a strong consumer and customer focus, which I absolutely love, because we have to provide a set of resilience services. They can't go down.
Right.
So I work with my operations teams to make sure that that we have everything in order to keep everything highly resilient, up and running, and provide that great experience to the to our customer.
Yeah.
And it's a perfect complement to the other side of my role, the CIO role, because it really provides an end-to-end view. If you think about what we do with Cloud Ops, it's the external facing services. All those external facing services have to connect in to some internal services, for order processing, for revenue recognition. So I have the whole total end-to-end view and can, help the experience all the way through the customer journey.
Yeah. Well, and that's always a very interesting thing about the CIO role. We often refer to it as the helicopter view because CIOs internally to their companies have that end-to-end view. You know what all the different departments and the business needs are. But in a case like this, you've got the end-to-end view both internally and externally.
Right.
And interesting. How do you think this has changed or shaped your CIO role?
So I would say that it's changed the role by really taking learnings from both sides and bringing them together.
Sure.
When you look at the engineering component, in operations there, people tend to look at things through a different lens.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that, if you look at it through the IT lens, it's a little bit separate. What I have now is the end-to-end, and I can actually look at it and say, how can we bring the best learnings from IT into the cloud ops world, and vice versa? How can we learn from cloud ops and bring it in? And when I see some of the things that we've been doing in IT, like learning, machine learning and automation, and then I go over to cloud ops and see what they're doing with some of the tooling and monitoring, and you think you can bring them together, it becomes extremely powerful, really powerful.
Well, I imagine that it's also very inspiring for your teams, for the IT, your internal IT people, because they get a different view on other parts of the company.
That's right. They do get a different view, and also they're getting a different perspective on how to approach things, from a more engineering point of view.
Yeah.
So we bring those learnings in, and I have to say, on the cloud ops side, it's been a real eye opener for them also, because they had no idea exactly what does IT do. And it's like, wow, we didn't know that you actually did engineering support, or we didn't know that, you actually did build outs in data centers and stuff like this.
Yeah.
So as they're learning more and more about what an IT portfolio is for a company, their eyes are open. So if you look at the people perspective, you can give additional career path and learning and, kind of cross-pollinate between the different organizations.
Yes. Well, I've thought for many years that all of the focus we've had on bringing IT more deeply into the business and all the business collaboration, that it is, of course, career enhancing and eye-opening on the IT side, but I think equally as much on the business side. That final realization that it's not IT and the rest of the business.
That's right.
It is IT as part of the business.
That's right. That's exactly right. And I think that if you look at IT today, IT is a business within every business. So, the days of having IT kind of behind a wall, and being order takers.
The guys in the basement.
In the basement, pulling cables and things like that. Yeah. That's totally out.
Yes.
You have to really collaborate and understand what your business is. And then IT, technology, is pervasive all over within the business. My philosophy has always been, let's be an enabler. Let's understand, where IT can help, and let's enable the business to be able to use IT or technology by themselves.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we talked a little bit earlier about how different the role has become for CIOs in tech companies specifically. Because I think a lot of your colleagues out in banking and insurance and the other industries think that it must be a wonderland of all the budget you want, all the technology you want, all the talent you can get. It seems like you're living inside the companies that provide them with technology, so they probably have this kind of, I guess, rose-tinted glasses when they look at your role. So let's talk about what the reality is now, especially now that every company is thinking of itself as, we're a tech company that happens to fly airplanes.
Yeah.
So that's very cool now to everybody to be a tech company. But what is it like really to be the CIO at a tech company these days?
So, I think that in many ways, being a CIO at a tech company is similar to being CIO at other companies too, retail, financial services.
You're saying tech companies are regular companies like the rest of them?
We are regular companies. Yeah. We have budgets. Everything doesn't come,
You don't have
free.
A blank check?
No, we don't have blank checks. We have to add value to the business.
Yeah.
So, a lot of the challenges I would say are pretty similar across a lot of verticals. I think where maybe it's could be a little bit different is when you start, looking at, who our audience is internally.
Okay.
And I even think that that's changing in some respects. But, internally we have engineers, we have a lot of high-tech people, within using our services.
Right.
So if you think about that, then, everybody's a technology expert.
Yes.
So I would say that that is a little bit different. Although I would say that even in non-tech companies, everybody is becoming a technology expert only because technology is so pervasive in their personal lives. So the expectations are higher.
Yeah.
People tend to want to be creative in their own worlds.
Yeah.
So, the collaboration working with, within your business units with your business partners has to be a lot more.
Yeah.
Because you need to bring those ideas to the table so that they can understand what you can do and how you can help them.
Well, in many ways, it's one of those blessing and a curse situations where the more people use technology and all their devices, the more they think they know just as much about IT as the IT people do. I think it's a little delusional on the part of, the regular run-of-the-mill users because there's so much behind the scenes with the integration of everything and making it work and all of that. And it's an interesting conundrum now where IT is so popular and everyone thinks they understand exactly how it works. And I think it's probably much worse with engineers.
Yeah. I mean, there is that, but at Adobe, one of the things that we believe is that innovation can come from anywhere in the company. So we actually, open it up.
Yeah.
And I would say if you have those open lines of communication, one of the things that you can do is you can harvest those ideas. So a couple of things that we've done is we have what we call an Entrust program. And what an Entrust program is, if you're in a business unit and you see or you want to use a particular SaaS solution that you think is going to help your business process. If you can abide to some of our Entrust governance capabilities, which means, the security around data, how you work with the vendors and things like that, we'll entrust you to be the custodian of that SaaS solution. So we've done things like created APIs so that you can get to your data so that everything is self-service in certain situations. So this is what I mean by, everybody within the company can have an idea.
Yes.
And then if you use it within a certain set of governance and framework, then you can enable people to be the custodians of their own technology.
Well, and if you get them inside that governance framework, it pretty much removes the shadow IT problem.
That's right.
Essentially, I've heard some more forward-looking CIOs refer to shadow IT as shadow innovation.
Yeah.
Because it's ideas coming and the fact that you have the tools and you can access them. So it's not that you don't restrict everyone inside Adobe to just use Adobe tools.
That's right. That's right. And on that, I really feel that different roles need different types of tools. So one of the areas that we worked on is actually taking anything that is employee facing and putting it in one area. And what I mean by that is if you think about your employee-facing tools as your collaboration tools, your video, anything that the employee uses in order to do their role, we centralized it into one group, a direct report to me. And, within that last year, one of the things that we worked on is saying, let's look at our employees and let's look at the type of personas that they have. Because different personas may need different tools. So we've come up with 4 different personas. One is a builder. We have a large group of engineers.
Okay.
We have, enablers, which would be, our back office, finance, people like that.
You didn't want to call them the codependents.
No, we don't want to call them codependents.
So they're enablers.
They're enablers. Okay. We also have communicators and customer facing.
Oh,
and what you find is that those 4 personas will work in different ways. They have different needs for collaboration tools. They have different needs for how mobile they are. They're different types of desktops and things like that.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And, so now we're gearing the tools within the organization to those different personas. So when we work with the employees, when we bring things in, we think about, okay, what kind of persona is Mary Fran?
Yes.
And what kind of tools should we bring to the table? And how should we help to make her more productive versus saying, okay, I have this one particular laptop and everybody's going to use it.
Yeah. And here's all the tools on it, most of which you're never going to figure out how to use.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that the one size fits all kind of breeds some of that shadow IT.
Okay.
Okay.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
This also sounds like the personas, that's something that any company could adopt.
Absolutely.
That's
Absolutely. Any company could adopt. And actually, when I talk to my fellow CIOs and customers, they're quite interested in the personas and how we're going about doing that.
Yeah. How did you develop them? And this sounds like the sort of thing that marketing departments do. It's not something you necessarily expect the CIO to be in charge of. So how did it all come about?
So we partnered with our employee experience group. So our employee experience group would be called HR.
Okay. That would have been my guess.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
But we're an experience company, so we care very much about our employee experience because happy employees also make happy customers. And we had surveys. We ran focus groups, and we just did a lot of work to figure out the tools and how people work, and that's how we segmented the type of work within the organization into these 4 different personas. Yeah, you're correct that marketing groups do a lot of that, but it was important for us to understand the makeup and the identities of the organization so that we could better service them.
Is the largest group the builders?
Yeah, the largest group
is
is
the builders.
Yeah, and the second largest would be the customer facing.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yes, that totally makes sense.
Yeah.
And then you've got communicators.
Right.
And the 4th group is?
Enablers.
Enablers.
Yes.
All right. Now that sounds a little squishy. What are enablers?
So enablers help others do their jobs. So if you think about back office, you take a customer order, it has to be processed through order processing. It has to become revenue. It has to become an entitlement.
It's more the business operations.
Exactly.
They are the enablers.
That's right.
And that is just that's very cool.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about the IT organization and kind of its own journey, because we often do talk about the customer journey in these CIO Leadership Live interviews, and we'll definitely get to that. But I don't have very many companies that come in that have reached such a stage of maturity with their huge business transformation, going from your product was all on premises, and then 5 years ago you made the switch. This is before you arrived, because you arrived 2 years ago. So talk a little bit about the before and after, kind of what you found when you arrived 2 years ago and what has changed under your leadership.
Sure, I can absolutely talk about that. So when I arrived, I have to say it was actually a pleasure to join Adobe because IT wasn't broken. I've gone into other organizations where IT is broken. You have to repair the relationships with the business.
A lot of CIOs are drawn to that. They love a burning building.
Yeah.
Let me run in and fix things.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yes.
That's exactly right. Well, IT wasn't broken at Adobe. Now, IT, I would say, was lacking a mission, lacking vision. It had a very, I would say, good foundation because we had made the switch from being packaged software over to SaaS.
Yes.
So there had been a lot of work that was done in order to move, from, I would say, a traditional environment over to a services-based environment.
So a lot of the heavy lifting got done in those first 3 years.
Yeah, a lot of the heavy lifting got done. I would say that the services environment was more complex than it needed to be. So we actually did go through a simplification of that. Because of the complexity of the services environment, things were fragmented. There was a lot of fragmentation. There wasn't clear accountability. So we went through a process to bring teams together. So, the employee experience team I talked about, we formed that. Traditional, the I&O, infrastructure operations, a solutioning team. So brought these different groups together with clear purpose and clear identity. And the other thing when I joined that I did is kind of did this listening tour with IT in the business to understand exactly, what was working, what was not working, all the way down to the individual contributor level of IT. And then figured out, hey, we need to have kind of a mission. We need to have a cry here that we can all rally around.
You need a tagline.
I
love an IT group with like a mission statement and
and our goal is really to unleash the full potential of of everyone, which is our employees, our customers, and our partners. Again, we're a creative company,
Right.
so we want to position us to do that, and that's what was really brought IT together. In addition to that, we said, okay, how are we going to do that? And we said, okay, we're going to have cloud-like characteristics in our DNA. So we're
Yes,
going to
you
be
mentioned that, and I haven't heard
Yes.
that before. It's a very cool phrase, cloud-like characteristics in your DNA.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Explain.
So
Yeah.
you think about clouds, and you think about dealing with clouds. So dealing with Amazon, or dealing
Yeah.
with other cloud providers like Azure. It's really easy to do things with them, right? So you can.
Yes, it is designed to be easy.
It's designed to be easy. It's self-service. You can scale. You can expand on demand. So when I talk to my organization, it's like we really want to be easy to deal with. We want to take ourselves out of the equation. And when I talk about this, it's not just the operations roles that this pertains to, it's every single role within IT. Because if you're an individual contributor in a business ops function, or if you're in a solution group, you can think about how you're impacting or working with the people that you do day in and day out. You can say, how do I make it easier for people to interact with me? How do I design solutions that are self-service? How do I ensure that I have the right scalability, so when we have peaks, in the business, that we're able to scale up and go down? And I would say that it's been amazing to see the change within IT, because people have really rallied around that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
People
it's-
love a mission.
Yeah, they love
a
a
mission
mission.
that they can be part of and contribute
Yeah.
to. And
Yeah, and they
Yeah.
look at their own worlds and they say, okay, how do I change my own world in
Yeah.
order to actually further that mission within IT?
Well, and something you said actually reminded me, I forgot to tell our watchers who are out there now on Twitter, if you would like to ask your own questions of Cindy here, please go ahead and tweet them to us. We are watching the Twitter feed, and I'd be happy to serve as the servant of your tweet in. So please go ahead and feel free to ask questions as we go along here. As you went about, what's a specific example, something that shows that IT mission, unleash the creativity in our employees and customers? Give me a specific example, like an anecdote around that, where how it used to be and how it is now.
Yeah, so I can do that. So an example of this would be, I can give you actually a couple of examples. So we have a Hadoop infrastructure for our data. And, with the amount of data that you have within Hadoop, within our data lakes, it took a tremendously long time to test. And the testing results, aren't or weren't exactly what we would want 100%.
You weren't
100%.
thrilled.
Yeah,
No.
I wasn't thrilled.
Yeah.
So on one of my visits with my team over in India, kind of talked about that and said, maybe you could build something, to automate it, or maybe you could, spend some time looking at the problem. And 4 months later, I went back and they had built a Hadoop test framework, which actually cut the testing time by 90%. And automated the
Wow.
testing through the entire process. Now, if you can cut the testing time by 90%, that means you can test a lot more, and the
Yes.
quality goes up.
Yep.
So that would be an example of how we kind of unleashed the creativity within the organization. You unleash that, then the information that comes out of the data analytics is far more for our business people. They tend to unleash their creativity because they can see more information.
Yeah.
And then it's just kind of a ripple effect through the entire organization when you do things like that.
That
So
is
that
so
would
neat.
be one example of how we've done that.
Okay. What are some of as you were restructuring and refining the IT organization, talk a little bit about some of the new roles that you created or the new skill sets that you maybe cast more emphasis on.
So some of the new roles and areas of more emphasis, definitely in the employee experience area. I would say that was underserved before. A lot of companies, including ourselves, have spent, a lot of time with the experience that our external customers have. Not really enough time on the internal, on the internals. So I like to spend a lot of time, with the employees, and you really looking at how do we, better serve the internal employees.
Okay.
So really upgrading and looking at the internal. That would be one area we focused on. Another area that we focused on is in the architecture area. So how do we bring the concepts of enterprise architecture into the organization? We had
those are tough hires too.
They're really tough. They're really hard to find.
My friends in the recruiting community, their most difficult searches are for enterprise architects.
Yes. Yeah,
Right.
they're very talented,
Yes.
and very, very talented people, and very hard to
They're often
come
a
by.
little peculiar from what I do. Well, they're very, very. They're often the individual contributors.
That's right.
The ultimate individual contributors.
Right, because
Yeah.
they're thinkers, right?
Yeah,
they're
they are.
thinkers,
They
and,
are.
and
They're
they're kind
your
of out
serious
there.
brainiacs.
Right, they're,
Yep.
they're out there. So we created an enterprise architecture discipline. So we've staffed that up, and that's that looks at roadmaps. It looks at our customer journey. It looks at how we're looking at data for the organization.
Yeah.
So I would say that that's been an area where we focused a lot over the past year and a half in order to kind of bring that up.
Yeah.
So that's been another area.
Well, it's nice to hear, too, because oftentimes when I ask CIOs that question, the first answer is that they created a liaison position like a business relationship manager because of that a separate islands problem with IT, that they needed more collaboration with the rest of the business. But it sounds like these roles actually were part of reorganizing the way you were working inside IT as well.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, it's within IT. Yeah. And the enterprise architecture role is really interesting. It'd be a great role to have because it does work within IT, but it also has a strong link to the business for the business process, and additionally into our engineering groups, because we want to ensure that our technology choices are very complementary to what we're doing in engineering.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes perfect sense. Let's talk a little bit about the kind of your top. I always ask CIOs this as well. What are your top business and technology initiatives? What are the things that are the biggest accomplishments that you hope to make in the coming year?
Okay. All right. So I look at that, by looking at really four different pillars that we're focusing on as an organization. The first one is operational excellence.
Okay.
And operational excellence has to do a lot with the role that I have with cloud ops and also the IT infrastructure.
Of course.
So looking at always on, how do we become always on more so than we are today? How do we look at injecting different technologies into our IT and our cloud ops operations? So how do we look at AI, ML, self-learning, all of these technologies so that we can scale as an organization, scale smartly, and also continue to deliver a high level of service to the organization.
Okay.
So that's one area. The second area is all about experience. So there's two areas of experience. The first is our customer experience and looking at the end-to-end journey our customers have, and then injecting different tools and processes there that will make our customer experience better.
Okay.
And the second is the employee experience that we talked about.
Yes.
Really what I refer to as advancing the inside. So one pillar on experience. The third pillar is all about data and insights, and not just about dashboards and looking at the rearview mirror, but looking at how do we become proactive? How do we actually look at data with insights in mind, actionable insights in mind? So we've built what we called a data-driven operating model concept using our data warehouse, our data lakes in order to do that. So that's another area of focus. And the fourth area is all about what we call our business platform or advancing the business platform. So this would be our back office solutions that we use. It could be anything from getting compliant in GDPR and some of the revenue recognition rules to actually advancing how do we support our enterprise customers.
Okay. Well, I'm very excited to tell you that we have a question from Twitter.
We do. Wow. Oh, that is very exciting.
It is, because this is, I think, our 10th episode of CIO Leadership Live, and this, I think, is our first question that actually came from Twitter.
I'm honored.
I know, you should be, and it's a darn good one. It says, Cynthia, what are the new attributes of senior leaders who are leading? What are the kind of attributes you need from your senior leaders to lead digital transformation efforts and to really change the paradigms?
Yeah, so that's
excellent question.
Yeah, it is a great question. So the first thing that I would say from senior leaders is to have an open mind, right? Because you have to kind of get out of the IT mindset where we have solutions and we're going to deliver you solutions. To really,
everything's a problem that needs to be solved.
That's right.
Yeah.
To kind of like, okay, let me listen. Let me listen to what your problems are.
Yep.
If you think about what we've done a lot in IT in the past, it's been very much focused on inside out, really kind of tuning up our processes and, understanding how we become more efficient and effective as an organization and really,
productivity enhancing all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
So I need leaders, or I think the next generation of leaders is really focused outside in.
Okay.
Right. Understanding the customer, understanding the customer journey, listening to that and bringing those insights in, and really to, look at what we do as an organization from the customer point of view versus the inside out. So leaders that listen, leaders that are open-minded, and leaders that really understand the customer journey.
How do you encourage, or how do you skill up people that may be at senior leadership levels on your team, but maybe they've always enjoyed just doing their own work and keeping their heads down, sort of thing? Because I always remember that a lot of IT people purposely did not go into marketing and communications because they really liked working with technology and they liked the fact that they could do their own thing. So it's a mindset change for IT overall. This kind of invasion of all the communications and marketing savvy and skills that need to come in. So how do you train? How do you help people? How do you help them like this new direction, I guess?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think that what I've liked to do, I've always kind of thought of myself as a customer-facing CIO.
Yes.
And I kind of branded myself with that. And by that, I spend time with customers and I understand what their challenges are. What their challenges are. So I like to bring those challenges back, those learnings back to my team. And I actually challenge them to talk to customers. I challenge them to go to, different seminars and things like that. And actually outside of the immediate area, because I think it's important for them to have contacts in other industry groups, not just high tech, but other industry groups, because you learn from how other industry groups, do things and what their challenges are. So really kind of branch out outside of their comfort zone and really look at, how do I get my own view of the customer? How do I see what is maybe going on in financial services versus high tech? Kind of build those networks.
Well, and I know some CIOs that are purposely sending some of their IT people to conferences where they're going to be surrounded by marketers.
Yes.
There's a lot of enterprise marketing conferences out there. And so there certainly is a wealth of choices to make. So it's more than just sending them to the Adobe Briefing Center.
That's right.
To meet with customers and talk about product features.
That's
this is much broader.
Yeah, absolutely. Excellent. Broader.
Excellent. The emerging technology trends, the things that you think are most impacting both Adobe's business and also your customers' business. What are some of the obvious choices there of the things?
Well, I think some of the obvious choices are talking about, machine learning, artificial intelligence. We've had, we, Adobe, have had, the AI built into our products. We've referred to it in the past as the Adobe Magic. But what we're doing on the product side is really taking that, we have our AI ML kind of framework, which we call Sensei, and, in extracting it and building more into our products so that customers can use it, as a framework, in their businesses as well.
Yeah.
So that's going on the product side. Within the IT side, we use the machine learning and artificial intelligence as well. Talked about a little bit about the test factory that we built.
Right.
That's a lot of automation, but we've also built what we call a self-healing framework. And kind of the the underlying premise there is if you have to fix something in operations, when things are running and things like that, if you have to fix it, that means you can automate it. And if you can automate it, then the framework can learn and it make itself better and add more to it.
So is this an application development area that often when I hear self-healing, it's usually about networks, but this is much broader?
It is much broader.
Okay.
Network is a great example. So if you take the network example and then you bring that network example, say, into your applications that are running and providing services, things break. So you might have, something that, space might be getting full, or you might be getting alert out.
Not space, the final frontier.
Not space, the final frontier, storage space, things like that. So there are a lot of things that can happen while your services are running. So what this does is it takes the same concepts that you would self-heal in a network and brings that to the application layer. And it'll fix things. So, for example, we've done a lot of, looking at our self-healing framework. And before, on average, it would take a person, a technician, about 30 minutes to fix an issue.
Okay.
With the self-healing framework, the technology can fix it in like slightly over a minute.
Okay.
So there's a real time saving there, of the 30 minutes. But more importantly, you are bringing a return to service, or you're improving your service to the ultimate customer by about 29 minutes. So there's, instead of having
pretty significant.
It's huge.
Yeah.
It's absolutely huge. So the quality of service goes up, and the amount of time that technicians have to spend manually fixing things goes down. And then they become the technicians that actually get exposure to the AI, the ML, and start to write these frameworks. So they, their skills are being expanded and their knowledge is being expanded as well.
Now, this work that you're doing in machine learning and AI, this is with additional outside tools. This is not just all Adobe gear.
That's right. That's right. And we use, within my organization for that, we make heavy use of open source. So bringing different open source tools together.
Yes.
And, putting them together in order to create these frameworks.
Yeah. Is your approach to app dev essentially all agile at this point, or do you still have a mix of agile and waterfall?
So we have a mix.
Okay.
I would love to say that everything could be done in agile, but in reality, when you have
with
a legacy,
I know, it's just any company
legacy
that's older than 5 years
That's right.
has always going to have, I think,
Exactly.
some sort of waterfall going on.
That's right. That's right. So we do have some waterfall going on as well.
You don't hear a lot about agile with ERP systems, for instance.
Right.
Although some of the processes, in fact, you had mentioned that you've got some AI-enabled ERP solutions.
Yes.
This is and maybe I'm just not up on the technology as much as I ought to do, but you mentioned that you've got using AI to take over some routine tasks in ERP.
Yes.
What's an example of that? Explain what that means.
So, we're using artificial intelligence and also RPA, the robotic process automation. We've been experimenting and are now implementing in the procurement area.
Okay.
So there are, contracts and things like that need to be set up. And it's a lot of manual effort. And we found by using, the automation, we can reduce the manual effort by about 80%. So instead of spending, like 1,200 hours doing the efforts, we've gotten it down to slightly over 200. So again, it frees up time on the, with our business partners so that they can do other value-added work as opposed to kind of some of the tedious work that they do.
Right.
So experimenting on many fronts with it to say, okay, how do we make IT more efficient? How do we take those same, tips and techniques over to the business and work with them and help them become, more efficient in their business processes.
Well, and I tend to think of those sorts of approaches as everyday innovation. You know, the sort of the just the constant improvement cycle that goes on in IT. And I think there's probably much more beneficial focus on that now. On what IT organizations can do. And one of the things we had talked about earlier about how you helped your group make a shift to being a product-focused delivery in IT versus a project kind of focus. I've had conversations with a lot of other CIOs about that, where they're trying to get everybody out of the project management mode where you finish this one piece and then you just move on to the next one and have kind of more of an ownership across a product. Explain how you made that shift and what it means at Adobe.
Okay, so we've made that shift in one of my areas, and now we're moving it out into some of the other areas. We started in our data analytics area.
Okay.
And you're absolutely right. On a product or a project focus, you have lots of discussions about, here's a capability, here's a list of requirements. And I would say in that area, your business users are very reluctant to let anything go because they want to get everything into that one project because they're afraid they'll never get a project again.
Right. We have to get this money and spend it right away.
That's right. We'll have to get it. If you move to a product mindset and you have a roadmap that spans a year plus, people will understand when their capability is coming. So the conversation with your business users totally changes to not one of, okay, I need this included now and we can't start until, you commit to it, to one of, let's work on our roadmap over a year and let's figure out when it makes sense in order to inject this capability. And then, both on the IT side, we can build it. On the business side, we can prepare for it. And then it becomes a rolling discussion and on a rolling delivery mechanism. And it's totally different than, okay, I need to negotiate these 10 items into a project. And I can't start until we get the negotiations complete, to one of, okay, let's look at the next year and let's figure out how we're going to deliver the roadmap in an agile manner and prepare for the capabilities.
Well, and I'm thinking how how beneficial that feels definitely on the business side. From the IT side, it helps shift that mindset where they want to make everything perfect before it launches.
That's
and getting
right.
to that, I think Bill Gates has talked for years about the 80%, getting to 80%, that in various tech, well-known tech giants have said stuff like, what is it? Perfection is the enemy of good.
That's right.
And,
That's right. Yeah.
And how did you find the mindset, say, 2 years ago versus now? How have you been able to kind of advance that?
So I would say that the product mindset or the moving to product definitely helps with the mindset.
It changes the expectations, doesn't it?
It changes the expectation, and it also, from an execution standpoint, says, let's go out and try it. Let's see if it works, because maybe some of this stuff doesn't work 100% of the time, and we shouldn't invest, the 110%. We should only be investing, the 70 or 80% to get it there and try it out. So that whole experimentation really works quite nicely. I would say that still in some areas of IT, there is, the mindset of perfection that we kind of have to get over. And in some cases, I would say that it's okay to have that in IT because certain areas, if you get into revenue recognition and some of the finance areas, you want that level of scrutiny and detail and perfection.
Exactly. Those areas where you don't want to necessarily be doing agile processes.
That's right.
All the regulatory. You had mentioned earlier I think it's either the Entrust model or the Entrust model that you put in place. Explain more about that. What is that? Is that a program, or is that a particular approach to certain kinds of issues?
So I would call it more an approach versus a program.
Okay.
And the approach is that, if there are SaaS solutions that, would be good point solutions that organizations use, and I'll use our legal department. Actually, many legal departments, I would say, are in the same boat where they need a lot of automation in order to further their processes. So there's a lot of great solutions on the market. However, you need to integrate those solutions with some of the core back office. So what we've done is we've created APIs, we've created a governance model that allow our users to go out, procure a SaaS solution, and then live within the framework of governance, use the APIs, and then self-manage that solution within their own department.
Okay. Well, that sounds like a pretty sensible approach, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's
you must put some of these things in place and think, why didn't we do that 5 years ago?
Yeah. Well, yeah. And, I like to think of myself as an enabler, and help people use the technology that is available versus saying you have to come to IT in order to get it.
Right.
Which is why one of the reasons why we have the cloud-like characteristics. Okay. Because I want my organization to say, let's take IT out of the equation. And I don't mean eliminate IT. What I mean is take us out of the equation by equipping our business users with self-service, things that they can, use day in and day out to enable their own business capabilities.
And all that is that, and that's essentially an IT foundation that is growing more through AI, machine learning. It's essentially getting to be a bigger part of the piece that no one ever has to notice.
That's right. That's right. We don't want to be noticed. That would be ideal, right?
Yeah.
Is it you can just go to a portal, order.
And it all just works.
Yes. That's the vision, right?
Exactly. Let's talk a little bit about your data analytics and governance strategies, because I think that that's always very interesting to our audience. Do you have what you would describe as an enterprise data strategy?
Yes.
All right.
Yes, we do.
What is it, and what does that mean for you?
So on the data strategy, we refer to it as DDOM, which is a data-driven operating model.
Okay.
Because we want to, and we have matured past, looking at dashboards and just having information, to one of being able to be proactive and actually, look into the future and, make business decisions. And I would say that the core tenets that kind of support this are commonality of data. So making sure that we have common data definitions across different business units. So if you think about,
not so easy to get to.
No, it isn't. It isn't easy. So if you think of just the definition of customer or the definition of product, I can go down the list. It takes a lot of time in order to get that common definition, but it's really important because once you get to that point, then you can share.
Everything else gets easier.
Everything else gets easier. So that's one. The other one is consistency of measurement. So if you think about how you measure different, metrics within the business, if you have a consistency of the definition of how you're going to measure it across the business areas, then you have common language. So common language is really, really important to have. So that would be the second one. The third one is what I would refer to as actionable insights. You can display a lot of information. That's the holy grail.
Yeah. Everybody loves that. Yeah.
You can display a lot of information, but if you can't action it, then you're not being proactive, and I don't feel you're delivering that value to the business.
You're just pouring more data out of the hose, and it's not necessarily giving anybody a drink.
That's right. That's
what
right.
they want.
Right. So being able to have those insights, understand what's going on, maybe within the customer journey, and then saying, this is how I can change it for the future, as opposed to, this happened in the past, and maybe I could have done something differently.
The rear view mirror look.
Exactly, is really important. And then the fourth area is really around governance. How do we have a virtual network of data stewards? How do they work together? How do we make sure that the information is handled, consistently across the organization? What are our rules for engaging? Not trying to be a central group that does that, but really providing the overall enterprise governance and then having it distributed more in a virtual manner across the enterprise.
And does this require a governance committee or a meeting of some sort? Is there a regular meeting of the minds between the different business units? Because I know every time CIOs bring up governance, I imagine they get a lot of sighing and eye rolling from their business colleagues because it sounds like some boring old IT thing. Why do we have to talk about this? So how do you socialize that? How do you make governance exciting?
So
or appealing?
I'm not sure it'll ever be exciting.
No, yeah,
but
you're right.
I
That's a
think
bridge too far. Yeah. Yeah.
I think people have bought into it. So we actually started as part of our data-driven operating model.
Okay.
And
the DDOM.
DDOM, yes. And it's kind of like one of these things, what's in it for me.
Yeah.
So if you understand the governance framework, if you understand the data definitions, how you can play, then your data that you use is going to become that much more actionable for your business unit. So we started kind of small and expanding out with the metrics and the information that
So
we
that way
needed to
there's
use.
something in it for people.
Exactly. As
Yeah.
opposed to saying, let's take everybody from the organization that has anything to do with data and bring them into a room and have these big governance meetings. We didn't do that. We said, okay, how do we get the people involved that, have a need for data-driven operating model right now? And then how do we expand it over time with more of a virtual network, not a sit down, we're going to go through every data element and figure out, how it's going to be governed.
Okay.
And then we have tools and data glossaries and things that are really self-serve, right?
Back to self-serve.
Back to
yes.
self-serve, where people can, keep things up to date, understand who's the data steward, and really it becomes kind of this virtual organization.
Is the goal to have the DDOM, the data-driven operating model, essentially encompass the entire company, or is there always going to be other forms of how many operating models are there?
So the data-driven operating model, yes, will be across the board for both our consumer mid-market and then our enterprise business.
Okay.
The second part of your question about will there be other forms? Yes, there will be other forms because we'll always have financial reporting to be done. So we need systems of record for financial reporting, for SEC, all that kind of great stuff. So I always see it as there'll be, different flavors of reporting for the different needs in the organization.
Okay, that makes total sense. We talked a little bit, we've touched on innovation several times, especially when we were talking about using the machine learning and AI as product and business enablers. You had mentioned when we talked before healing as a service and how it saves time and shifts work out of the queue. Is that an official program? It sounded like all initial caps, healing as a service.
Yeah, so it is
HOS.
HOS. We call it HOS.
Do you? Okay.
Yes, we call it
well,
HOS.
you call the other thing DDOM, so why not,
We do call it HOS for
All
sure.
right.
Yeah, so it started actually, I would say in a little innovation camp in IT, trying to figure out how do we make things better? How do we, simplify the complex and, bring some, value add to the table? Is it a program? Yeah, I would say that it is an ongoing program.
Okay.
We started small in one area and now we're moving it into other areas of IT where we can, self-heal. We've actually moved it into our analytics area. In order to process that data, a lot of data has to come in. We have to kind of munge it and
be sorted and cleaned
cleansed,
and labeled
all that kind of
and
stuff
meta
like that.
tagged and
Right, and when and things can go wrong. So again, as you fix things, if you can fix it, you can self-heal it and you can, make it correct for the next go around. So yes, absolutely, it's a program, and I see that it's growing, and it'll continue to look for other areas of opportunity.
Yeah. And does this thinking about and the approach to healing as a service, how does that translate onto the product side? Onto all that, the cloud operations, for instance, that reports to you?
So within the cloud operations, we have a lot of automation there that we actually use within that framework. But we're also looking at, we're looking across both ways. We're looking at, from the IT perspective, how do we learn from the engineering mindset? They tend to be very mature in areas such as DevOps and things like that. So how do we bring that into IT? And then with the complexities of IT, how do we bring some of that self-learning and those frameworks into cloud operations?
Okay.
So it's a two-way sharing, actually.
Yeah. All right, good. Also, in approaching innovation and in the way, in your philosophy about it, in the leadership tenets that you follow with it, some CIOs take a structured approach to it. Like you have mentioned the innovation camp. And I don't know, is that actually a group that has a specific name? Or do you take a less structured approach to it?
I would say, mine is really less structured.
Okay.
because innovation can come from many different areas.
And it should.
And it should. It
Yeah.
should. Absolutely should. So there's a lot of great ideas that come out. What I found is that people across IT will collaborate. You might have somebody in an engineering group collaborating with somebody in an application group in order to bring the ideas to life.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what we want them to do. Somebody asked me once, for some of the ML and AI, do you look for an ROI before you start an effort?
Deadly, huh?
Exactly. That's my
Yeah.
thought. Because if you look for a return on investment, how are you going to know what the possible is, what the art of the possible
You're
is?
immediately getting all practical, and you're immediately saying, if you fail at this and you don't have an ROI, then we're not going to be happy. And that's anything that discourages experimentation and failure and moving forward essentially quashes innovation.
That's right. That's right. Yeah,
You'd
you
think
need to
that
be,
would be obvious to people.
well, yeah.
Not always.
Yeah. But no, you need to fail. You need to try things out. You
Yeah.
need to see what learns. You need to take those learnings, bring them into your next try.
Well, it's very much a company cultural approach too.
Right.
I've had a couple of CIOs who've been on recent episodes have talked a lot about the way they've developed kind of a team-based approach and the culture and how encouraging it is of people to play around with things.
Yeah.
Do you do anything like I've heard like technology petting zoos and that sort of thing where you set up an area where people can come and play with more advanced tech tools? Is that something you're into?
We've done some tech fairs. I'm not sure I'd call it a petting zoo or anything like that, but we have done tech fairs in order to share technology. We've done that within the IT organization. We've actually done some at different site levels in order for our business users to get familiar with what mobile technologies and
Yeah.
up and coming things in that area. So we've done that. The other thing that we've done, which I think is really cool, is we have set up what we call Lab 82. And Lab 82 is named after the year Adobe was born, 1982. And it's an innovation lab where we actually test out different technologies that will hit the workplace.
Okay.
So it could be, different forms of whiteboards or 360-degree conferencing solutions, or even the format and shape of tables for better collaboration.
Oh,
And
interesting.
there is exactly where we want to fail fast, because what we don't want to do is, buy a bunch of technology and roll it out to a whole building and then find out, well, this doesn't really work the way that we thought it would.
Yeah.
So we bring, people can reserve this Lab 82 to have different types of collaborative meetings and different sessions, and we observe them and see how they use the technology, or maybe they don't use the technology, and then that's a fast fail and it gets out of the organization.
Well, I know GE is doing a lot of this. I've talked with various GE CIOs, and they undertook an entire, I think it's their lean approach. I can't remember exactly what they call it, but it has to do with Agile, and it also, all the projects you have to go out and get customer feedback. Like they're creating a new refrigerator, for instance, and they try it out, and they what do they call the most viable products?
Yeah.
You get the MVP out there, and then it's almost always a surprise and sometimes a shock, the actual customer feedback, because you're giving them something that you thought they always wanted, and it turns out they want that thing instead.
Yeah, I
you know?
can see that, and that's why I would say kind of the old way of working, of getting everything done and perfect.
Yes.
It's not today, right?
Yeah.
I would say that people are more tech savvy. They have higher expectations and demands. So get the ideas out there and try them and see really what works and what doesn't work.
Well, and companies like Apple are famous for that. Everybody raves about the iPad and the iPhone, and they forget all about the Apple Newton.
Yes, right.
It was a huge disaster, right?
Right, that's
but
right.
look what it led to,
Yeah.
and it's that sort of approach. And we're down to the last few minutes here, and I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of your own approach to leadership, the future of the CIO role. This is your third CIO position now, your third role. What have you learned along the way that makes you a better CIO today?
So I think along the way, learning, it's not about the technology. It's really about the people. It's about relationships. That really matters. So I spend a lot of time with my staff. I listen to them. I think it's really important to hear what they have to say. They're the pulse of the organization, and they actually do all the work. I like to say that I'm just kind of this, facilitator that gets
You're
them
the
what they need,
figurehead.
right? But they actually do all the hard lifting. So that's one area. And then relationships with the business, relationships with customers, really strong. The outside in view, I would say, is critical. Really focusing outside in and ensuring that you know what the customers, who your customers are, where they're going with their businesses, so that you can prepare your organization for that into the future.
Excellent. And when you think about the future and where the CIO role is heading, do you think ultimately everyone will be in CIO plus roles? It's just, it's
I
a
think
very
so.
big job anyway.
Yeah.
And sometimes I talk to CIOs and they're like, how am I going to take on another job when this is
Yeah.
already a pretty huge job? But of course, that depends on how well you're training your team and whether you're mentoring for the people behind you to come up and take over some of
Yes.
those.
Yeah, I think it's a natural extension of the CIO role
Yeah.
to have more responsibility, especially when it gets into some of the operational areas.
Sure.
Right? Because the technology with that end-to-end view, it touches all the operations within the company.
Yes. It turns out the CIO helicopter is a good place to be.
It is. It's one of my favorite places to be.
Yes, exactly. Let me see. I think we are right at about time. I had one more question I wanted to ask you. We've mentioned a few times the customer journey. When you talk about that, what do you mean exactly, and how has that changed? How do you view it differently than you might have, say, 2 years ago when you joined Adobe?
So I talk about the customer journey, it would be from the time an individual or a company is a potential. They don't even, they're not even an Adobe customer or whoever customer right now. And then, there's this whole life cycle of the customer all the way through to, buying the product, using the product, all the way to supporting and then nurturing the relationship. In the past, I think the customer has been thought about in silos. There's the sales cycle.
yeah.
Okay, there's the actual support cycle. The actual cycle in the middle, of how you're actually using and engaging the product, I would say it hasn't really been thought of in the past, but that's one of the most exciting areas for me.
Okay.
Because, it used to be let's work with the customer and automate all the processes to get them on board, and then let's automate all the support. There's this whole middle piece of engaging with the company during that time frame that is just rich for opportunity.
Yeah, well, and it turns you into more of a partner with them rather than a vendor to them.
That's right.
Yep.
That's right.
And
it's the ongoing communication, ongoing usage, how they're engaging. You talked about the refrigerator,
Yeah.
right? How do they use that refrigerator, and what kind of features can you add in to increase your customer loyalty
Yes.
over that period of time?
Yeah, when you think back a few years, who would have thought that you'd expect to get ice and a drink of water out of the front of your fridge?
That's right.
And now it's kind of a standard.
Yes, yes. So I would like my refrigerator
Yeah.
to tell me everything that's going to expire,
Uh-huh.
so that
Well,
I
it's
can
very
use
close.
it in a recipe. Right?
I'll bet you're probably going to hear from several refrigerator manufacturers who have that capability today, because that
Great.
is coming right along.
Good.
Well, thank you very much. It's been delightful talking with you today. And if you are joining us late for this wonderful conversation with Cynthia Stoddard, the CIO at Adobe Systems, and you'd like to watch the full episode, and we cannot blame you for that, it's a fabulous episode, you can find this posted tomorrow on CIO.com, and the audio podcast will be made available within the next 24 hours or so on iTunes, Google Play, and SoundCloud. And I hope you will also join us for the next episode of CIO Leadership Live, which will be on Thursday, June 7th at 4 o'clock in the afternoon Eastern Time. And I will be talking with James Rinaldi, who is the CIO and the Director of IT at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. Thanks very much for joining us today, and we will see you again soon.